All right, students. So here is your recording or my recording for chapter uh, chapter 9. A couple of things I want to highlight here. Number one, our first exam is Thursday, next Thursday, uh, February 19th. Of course, it'll be in Shaw 121 over chapters 1 through 7. Um, the exam guidance recording that I've made uh, is in Discovery this week for your review. I would recommend you listen to that recording. That will help you focus on those elements of the exam that are going to be most important for you to know. So. All right. Just a little bit of a heads up. Your country paper number 2 is due on March 8th. So just have that bookmarked um, in your planner or on your calendar. So let's talk about chapter 9, um, economic development in the Americas. So this will be a bit of an abbreviated version. There's a lot of content in chapter 9 that I'm sort of excluding just because of the sheer volume of the content. So first thing we want to talk about is free trade agreements. What is a free trade agreement? So it is an agreement between two or more countries where the countries agree on certain obligations that affect trade in goods and services. Typically, a free trade agreement will be with countries that are geographically adjacent, meaning, for example, the US, Canada, and Mexico. So there is a USMCA uh, which is a trade agreement that has certain um, aspects of that agreement as it relates to the movement of goods and labor across the U.S., Canada, and Mexico. It's typically not a political union. They are typically the members of a free trade agreement are typically separate uh, sovereign nations. So, um, obviously the US and Canada and Mexico are different sovereign countries, but that they've all entered into the USMCA free trade agreement. All right. So, within the Americas, for years, the U.S. and Canada had been the world's largest bilateral trading partners. Relative to each one. So each one was the other's largest trading partner. Um, but despite this relationship, tariff and other trade barriers have hindered greater commercial activity. So later, the U.S. and Canada established a U.S.-Canada free trade area. The goal was to eliminate all trade barriers between both countries. And the idea is that it creates a single continental commercial market for all goods and services and eliminating tariffs and other trade barriers without any political union. And then, of course, shortly thereafter, uh, Mexico wanted to join that free trade agreement as well. There is, of course, there are many different free trade agreements. Just highlighting here, Dominican Republic Free Trade Agreement. In 2005, President Bush 43 signed into law a comprehensive free trade agreement between Costa Rica, Dominican Republic, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, Nicaragua, in the U.S. So just another example of trade agreements that countries may enter into with the idea of bolstering workers and businesses within their economies. All right. Other free trade agreements we want to highlight here, Mercosur, that includes Argentina, Bolivia, Brazil, Chile, Paraguay, and Uruguay, is the second largest common market agreement in the Americas after NAFTA, which is now sort of evolved into USMCA. Um, this treaty calls for common market that would eventually allow for free movement of goods, capital, labor, and services among the member countries with a uniform external tariff. Another example that we can point to is the formation of the European Union or EU several years ago. And again, it was sort of the idea of having countries within Europe, continental Europe, I should say, that, excuse me, and also including the United Kingdom. And the idea is that there would be limited trade barriers within the EU, and that would allow, the idea was for the EU to become more competitive with the United States or the US, Canada, and Mexico by banding together and forming this larger economic production engine, if you will. And so that happened right around the turn of the century in the 21st century. All right. Um, here back onto the Mercosur free trade area. With the addition of Bolivia and Chile in 1996, it became at that time a market of 220 million with a combined GDP of nearly 1 trillion. So again, all of these agreements are intended to sort of pay off on the axiom there's strength in numbers. And so if countries that are typically adjacent to one another, they lower any trade barriers within that trade agreement and then erect some kind of trade limitations outside of that trade agreement, then the idea is that all of the countries, all the signatories of that given free trade agreement would have uh, try to approach a more monopolistic kind of power relative to other countries that are not part of the agreement. Okay. Um, of course, Latin America, we're certainly seeing uh, this change even, very recently in Venezuela, but many countries in Latin America, as you probably are aware, have uh, sort of swayed back and forth at times between more democratic kind of governments and more militaristic kind of dictatorships. Of course, when we talk about the Monroe Doctrine, or a few weeks ago, we talked about the so-called Donroe Doctrine, that the idea is that the U.S. is focused on helping countries in the Western Hemisphere and here specifically within Latin America to move away from dictatorships and move more toward democratic kind of republics. Now, one of the benefits is that we're seeing this even in Venezuela right now in the spring of or in February of 2026, that countries are moving toward investment in Venezuela because of the hope for improved uh, government away from Nicolas Maduro into more of a democratic kind of republic. So this is basically a question as to, what will a free trade agreement look like in the Americas? I think the short answer is long term, it's hard to say. If in fact the United States starts to pursue more of a Monroe doctrine kind of direction, then we might see, maybe the uh, changing of different free trade agreements, maybe the USMCA between the US, Canada, and Mexico is eliminated. Maybe there's a different kind of agreement. I think it's going to be, in the long run, is hard to say how that will actually shake out. So, what are some of the strategic implications for marketing as it relates to these free trade agreements? Number one, as a country develops, of course, incomes change, population concentration shift expectations to a quote better life, adjust to higher standards, new infrastructures evolve, and social capital investments are made. So, for example, um, I have not had the opportunity yet to go to India, but as I understand it, over the last 20, 30 years, because of India's, relatively speaking, very highly educated population, and certainly over the last 20, 30 years, that there is sort of this middle class that is developing or has been developed within India. And so you're going to see and certainly we have seen purchase decision-making preferences and standards of living change because of that increase in development. And so that has certainly an impact on us as marketers to understand which products and services would potentially move from being out of consideration into a category of being considered because, relatively speaking, per capita incomes would increase or increasing in India relative to what they used to be. So, of course, when incomes rise, new demand is generated. And then, of course, countries with low per capita incomes are potential markets for a variety of goods, but those goods and services are probably quite different than those countries that are, on average, have higher per capita incomes. And then, as we were talking about, as incomes rise to sort of a quote middle class range, you're going to see demand for, you know, nicer cars, nicer appliances, homes, maybe nicer homes, maybe, um, yeah, uh, uh, educations that may be within a given developing country, or, where young men and women are going to other uh, regions of the world, like for example, the U.S. or Europe, to study abroad and then move back home. So, all right. And then just sort of summarizing here again, because there's just so much information in this chapter. To summarize, the global marketer of today and tomorrow needs to be able to react to market changes rapidly. Again, we've talked about it in class. The changes that have been happening within Venezuela are a great case study in seeing how a dramatic change in a political structure can have a dramatic effect on the appetite for other countries and other companies in other countries to invest based upon the increased, or at least the perceived increased stability of that new political structure, and therefore sort of in the abstract, the risks associated with investing in that country with that new political structure will have gone down. Number two, the impact of political, social, and economic trends will continue to be felt throughout the world, resulting in significant changes in marketing practices. Um, you know, uh, One of the reasons why I love marketing as a discipline is it's so intertwined within uh, uh, anthropological and sociological changes and shifts in not only the composition of different types of people and incomes in different parts of a given country. And so, because of that dynamism, I think marketing is one of those professions where depending on what you're doing and what countries you're working with, which products and services you're marketing. You can have I believe, a very exciting career because every day might present new opportunities that even one day prior did not necessarily exist. So ultimately, marketers must focus on devising marketing plans designed to respond fully to each level of economic development. Um, so again, for example, if we look at India, depending on the products or services that, if let's say we're a U.S. firm marketing to India, we have to be cognizant of what are those different income bands and, can our products and services apply to different categories along, for example, different income brackets in a way that maybe we add a few features to sell to maybe higher income households, or maybe de-feature or have fewer features to be able to market to lower income brackets. So again, we can think about automobiles, and particularly around Toyota. We might say, well, Toyota, if I'm a VP of marketing for Toyota, I have, the economy cars like a Corolla, but then I also have a car that is maybe for quote unquote the middle class, which would be maybe a Camry, and then the upper income where we would look at, for example, a Lexus. So, in the auto industry, for Toyota, they have the ability to shift um, uh, production inputs based upon the type of target audience that they're marketing to, whether it's lower, middle, or higher income. So, with that, that's all for this chapter. This is being posted in Discovery, so you guys can review this at your next earliest opportunity. Thank you very much.